Welcome back, my beautiful people. Are you curious to know what happens next? I'm having a great time telling you Melanie's story. Do me a favor, subscribe, and tell a friend. Comment, and tell me what you'd do different if you were in Melanie's shoes. Now, let's get back to it. Melanie just got the shock of her life, and she's on the run. A phone call to check on her loved ones tells her that Sasha has totally assumed her life. I got back into my car and drove back to the hotel. There was an envelope on the floor of the room when I returned. Curious, I picked it up to find that it was addressed to me. No one knew I was here. No one. My hand shook as I tore it open to pull out the note inside. It was from the hotel manager. He wanted to know how much longer I was planning on staying and if I would be using the same credit card for an extended stay. I almost peed myself. My hotel stay was up, and I needed to decide if I wanted to stay or leave. My room was on the 4th floor, so I got back in the elevator to go down to the front desk. When I got there, I immediately went on high alert. I observed the desk clerk as he walked back and forth between the front desk and the area behind him. He had what I had decided was the robotic gait Chris, Sasha, and Julius had. When he spotted me looking at him, he smiled and took his place behind the desk. "May I help you?" he asked me. I schooled my features and smiled back at him. "Yes, I found a note from the manager asking me about the length of my stay. I was planning to check out in the morning, so I'd like to settle my bill now, if that's okay." "Yes, that would be fine, ma'am. What room are you in?" "I'm in room 402, I replied. I watched him type in the room number and then he printed out the bill. I gave him my credit card and he asked for my driver's license. I gave it to him and watched his confused expression as he scrutinized my license. I almost laughed but didn't. He handed it back and closed my account. I returned to my room and quickly packed. I wasn't spending another night if I had anything to say about it. The clerk was a robot, and I figured that I was found out. Now they knew my alias too. I didn't know if they had a mirror branch out here, and I wasn't going to hang around to find out. I waited until it was very late to leave. Since I didn't have a suitcase, I walked out with the backpack I'd gotten, full of my meager belongings, and got in my car and drove away. I was on the road again, and I wasn't sure I wanted to stop anywhere for the night. I changed direction and headed south. Florida might be better for now. I decided that I wasn't going to give them any more paper trails, so before I took off, I withdrew enough money for a few days' worth. Finally, after 12 hours, I entered Florida. I booked myself into the first motel I came to. I'd been to Miami before, but this wasn't the tourists' part. This area had run-down homes and cheap motels. Still, it was warm and the motel was clean. I booked a 3-day stay and went out for something to eat. The Hispanic diner served a good rice and chicken combo, and enough that I could eat it twice. I packed up what was left and headed back to the motel. The motel was clean, and that was the only thing good about it. The walls were paper thin, and I could hear the couple next door moaning out their pleasure. On the other side, a baby cried, and outside, the salsa music was loud. The noise was something I could relate to since I was from New York, but it also put me at a disadvantage. If I were found out, I wouldn't hear them coming for me. The next morning, I awoke with a bad headache. I quickly showered and let the housekeeper in to clean. I took all my stuff out with me while she cleaned. I returned later to even more noise. I cried because I felt hopeless. What was I going to do? This wasn't what I'd envisioned for my life. I still had enough money to get by, but I couldn't keep it up forever. I needed to make a living, something that wouldn't bring attention to me. I went back out to get a newspaper. I scoured the ads for something lucrative but inconspicuous. I spotted an ad that sounded promising. I jotted down the number and went to sleep. Come morning, I was going job hunting. It had been almost 3 weeks since I took off, and as far as I knew, I wasn't missing. I picked up a copy of What's In to find that the magazine was going strong. I was featured in one of the ads, congratulating me on my 2-year anniversary with the magazine. I looked great. I couldn't take it anymore. I had a good cry and then vowed that I was going to expose them if it was the last thing I did. The employment office building was in the business district, and it was easy to get to from the motel. 20 minutes later, I walked away with the job. I was going to be the best housekeeper the influential Witherspoon family ever had. I could start right away, so I went back to the motel and checked out. Mr. and Mrs. Witherspoon showed me to my room, and then the head of the house laid out my duties. I was to ensure that their little darling Spencer got to school on time. He was to meet his school bus promptly at 7:45 a.m. My other duties were to keep the house clean, do the laundry, and serve dinner. I didn't have to cook it, but once Mrs. Witherspoon cooked it, I was to serve and clean up after. I had Sundays off and my salary was in cash. Perfect. I needed a place to hide and I needed to make a living. I got both with the job and no more paper trail. My first morning with the Witherspoons was frantic. No one woke up on time. Mr. Witherspoon was rushing around and so was the wife. Young Spencer was quiet and ate his breakfast slowly. My job was cut out for me if this was how this family was, I thought. They had no order. The husband was an executive in finance, and the wife was a registered nurse. You would think that she could run her household, but she was a mess. Once everyone was on their way, I decided that later I would have a talk with them. The kitchen was a mess, but I didn't mind cleaning it. What I liked about the house was that they didn't have any smart devices in it other than their phones and the big vid mounted on the wall in the living room. As I cleaned, I planned out which of the various chores I was going to do next. After loading the dishwasher, I headed down into the basement to tackle the laundry. It was a horror show down there. Mrs. Witherspoon hadn't done laundry in months, it seemed. I was going to be doing laundry all day. Well, that's okay, I suppose. Everything had a thick layer of dust on it, like no one cleaned it all for weeks. Had they really let everything go to heck while they waited for a new housekeeper? And why did the last one leave? I hadn't made a dent in the laundry when young Spencer returned home from school. He asked for a snack, and then went up to his room to do his homework. I asked him if he needed any help, and he replied that he didn't. He was a strange kid, to be sure. He didn't run up the stairs like a normal kid. He walked up carefully. By the time I had finally finished the 5th load of laundry, Mr. and Mrs. Witherspoon arrived home from work. She quickly changed and went into the kitchen to cook. I left her to it while I went back down to finish folding the laundry. While I folded the clothes, I could hear the family moving around upstairs. After I was done, I looked around at the mountain of clothes surrounding me. How much clothing did the family have? I must have washed 30 towels alone. What have they been using while this lot was down here? I went back upstairs to find that dinner was done. She had a whole chicken perfectly browned and baked in the oven, mashed potatoes and gravy on the stove. "Will you please set the table for me, Melanie?" she asked. "Okay, should I use the dishes from the dishwasher, or do you want to use what's in the cabinet?" "Oh, don't bother with those. Use the ones in the washer," she directed me. I moved to unload the washer and noticed shards of glass on the bottom. I quickly took the dishes out and went to set the table. In the back of my mind, I was starting a puzzle, and I kept putting pieces together, but they didn't fit perfectly, so I had to keep starting over. Once the table was set, the family and I sat down to eat. The food was delicious, and I told her so. She smiled and nodded and kept eating. Another piece of the puzzle showed up, and I shoved it aside. The family ate everything on the table, all the mashed potatoes and the chicken and vegetables. Once they were done, they got up and went into the living room while I cleared up. Mr. Witherspoon sat in the single chair to read the newspaper, while his wife and son sat on the couch to watch the vid. I cleared the table and loaded the dishwasher. Then I went into the living room to ask about the laundry. Mrs. Witherspoon looked up at me with a blank expression on her face. I asked about the laundry again, and she told me that she would take care of it and thanked me for doing it. Well, that did it for me, and I said goodnight. I went up to my room and closed the door. My room had its own adjoining bathroom, and I took a shower while still fiddling with the puzzle in my head. The following morning, I made sure to be up early to see about getting the family out of the house without the chaos of the day before. Since Mrs. Witherspoon didn't want me to cook, I made a pot of coffee and then went up to wake everybody. I knocked on the parents' door and announced that it was time to get up, then went on to Spencer's room. I knocked and walked in. The boy was lying there with his eyes open. I assumed that he'd heard me knocking on his parents' bedroom door. He started and sat up. There was no expression on his face when his eyes focused on me. I watched him swing his legs out, and then he was standing. I nodded at him and went back downstairs. Mrs. Witherspoon was the first to come down, and she went into the kitchen to start breakfast for the family. I was curious, so I followed her in. She opened the fridge and pulled out a large bowl containing the eggs. Quickly and expertly, she whisked about 6 eggs in a bowl and cooked them in the pan she had heating up along with bacon. Then she got the bread for toast and then dished everything out. She asked me if I wanted anything. I told her no. The husband and son came down, and they sat down to eat. They ate everything and washed it down with orange juice and coffee. Before Mrs. Witherspoon left, she asked if I could get the groceries for her. She left a list on the counter and her card. After cleaning up in the kitchen, I went upstairs to make the beds and such. She said that she would take care of the laundry, but I didn't see where they would all fit, so I opened the closet and found that it was a huge walk-in closet. The shelves were almost empty, telling me that they had used up every item of clothing they possessed until I showed up to do the laundry. Didn't she know how to do laundry? I walked into Spencer's closet, and he too had a large walk-in, and it looked like he was down to the last bit of clean clothes as well. The puzzle was getting muddled now, and I needed to think. Something about the clothes was bothering me, and it wasn't until later that I figured it out. Chris had clothes strewn all over his living room too, like he didn't know what to do with them. I checked out the Witherspoons before I took the job. They were a prominent family in the area. The husband had been at his job for 10 years, and his wife had been at hers for 6. Spencer was 9 years old, and his mother probably went back to work when he started school. They'd been married for 15 years. There was no way Mirror had a hand in their lives here, but the puzzle pieces were starting to fit now. I needed to investigate more. What are your thoughts with things as they stand now? Leave me a comment to let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to like and subscribe.